So in order for me to act as chair, we have to formally accomplish this task, which means somebody has to propose it.
I will propose that we let Lou be chairman for this meeting.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay, so call the meeting to order. We have a quorum, I guess, but we have the roll.
Mr. Ackerson?
Here.
Ms. Bindum? Here. Mr. Fell?
Here.
Mr. Fitch? Mr. Hopkins?
Here.
Mr. Otto?
Here.
Mr. Storr?
Here.
Mr. Trail?
Here.
Mr. Turner?
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum. Changes to the agenda? None. Approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion for approval of the minutes of February 4?
So moved.
Second? Okay. Any items or discussion on minutes? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, communications.
There are a number of communications associated with the public hearings tonight, so we can probably address those then.
Okay, and we have them,
Yes.
okay. No continued public hearings, no old business, new public hearings. So, plan case 2268 M16. We will open this public hearing and quick reminders of how this works. The staff presents the case. The petitioner outlines the request, and in this case, the petitioner is the zoning administrator, so that will also come from staff. Then other proponents can present evidence, opponents can present evidence, and may ask questions of the petitioner through us, through the chair. Then staff can make additional comments. Petitioner may offer rebuttal. Petitioner may present a summary of the position, but not new evidence. Then we close the public portion of the public hearing, and the Plan Commission discusses the case, and the Plan Commission may or may not act on the case. So, Jeff.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hopkins. So a little context on this. This is a rezoning request that's part of a larger effort to redevelop the block north of the City Hall building. So part of that effort will include the rezoning. There will be a public input meeting on the design of the proposal, and then City Council will eventually negotiate and approve a development agreement. So this is kind of setting the stage for that more detailed process. The zoning administrator has submitted the application to amend these 5 parcels. 305 Elm, 306 Green, and 308 Green are currently zoned R5. 307 Elm and 205 Urbana are currently zoned R6. All of them are proposed to be rezoned to B4, Central Business District. These properties are owned by the city and are all currently vacant. They comprise the eastern half of a redevelopment site that goes from Vine to Urbana and from Elm to Green. So everything east of the north-south alley is up for rezoning. To the west of the alley is already zoned B4, Central Business District. The lots in question previously contained 8 single-family structures on them. When the city purchased them, we tore down these kind of rundown old homes. A little context for the area. So the lots are currently vacant in the yellow hash. The rest of the development site is all in blue. So there's currently a city parking lot on the southwest corner of the site, and the old Goodyear building, which is now vacant, on the northwest corner. The entire redevelopment site is 1.7 acres in area. The area to be rezoned is 0.83 acres. There was a city request for proposals in 2011 and again in 2014 or 15 to seek out a developer to put in a mixed-use urban style infill development here. And that's the process we're currently going through. The proposed development is still in the early planning stages, anticipated to consist of a 4-story building with ground floor retail and below-grade parking. And basically, the proposed rezoning would allow for the development, and it would also match the comprehensive plan. So we talked about the site's current and former uses, surrounding areas to the north. Along Vine Street, there's an auto oil change place. There's a couple vacant lots and a single-family home. Across the street to the east, we've got a couple single-family homes, a vacant lot, and a parking lot. Across the street to the south, we've got city parking lots at the City Hall complex. And then Vine Street fronts the development on the west. Across the street is the federal courthouse. And the zoning of all these parcels, basically everything west of the alley is zoned before central business. To the north, we've got R6, which is a high-density multifamily residential, and then R5 in the lighter brown, which is a medium-high-density multifamily. And that tracks all the way around to the east and to the south of the subject parcels. The comprehensive plan, future land use map for the site. It's kind of hard to see here, but it's purple, which is business, basically central business district is a designation from the 2005 comprehensive plan, which there was a lot of intense scrutiny around the area. Where should the downtown extend to? Where should the historic East Urbana go? But it was decided to make it a future land use of central business at that time. And the central business future land use designation talks about, it's exemplified by downtown Urbana, contains a pattern of development focusing on an urban style of development and architecture. Pedestrian, bicycle, and transit access are emphasized to ensure the areas are walkable. Contains a mix of land uses ranging from commercial to higher density residential. Mixed use developments are encouraged, and they should offer residential uses above a first floor of commercial and/or office space. There are several goals in the comprehensive plan relevant to this case. Goal 2.0, new development in established neighborhoods will be compatible with the overall fabric of that neighborhood. It should be of high quality and aesthetically pleasing. Goal 4, promote a balanced and compatible mix of land uses. encourage a variety of uses to meet the needs of a diverse community, make sure neighborhoods are convenient to transit so people can fulfill their basic needs, and offer efficiencies of density and a mix of uses. Goal 18, promote infill development, kind of speaks for itself, using techniques such as tax increment financing, which this project would take advantage of. Goal 22, increase the vitality of downtown Urbana, as identified in the Downtown Strategic Plan. When the comp plan was written, we had a 2002 strategic plan. We updated that in 2012, and we'll talk about that in a second here. Encourage housing downtown, encourage public-private partnerships, use TIF financing to promote new development, improve public infrastructure and parking lots and streetscapes. And then finally, goal 25, create additional commercial areas to strengthen the city's tax base. So all of these goals would be strengthened by the proposed rezoning. The 2012 downtown plan, actually let me pull that up. There were some relevant goals and additionally a concept plan. So I'll show the plan concept map. Okay. So you can see kind of in the center of the screen here is the site we're talking about. It's identified in the 2012 downtown plan as a key development site. There are a couple notes along Vine Street. Let's see. The site should be built up close to the sidewalk, basically, on Vine Street. And the development should relate to the neighborhood along Urbana Avenue, is what the notes say here. And you'll see the downtown border basically goes a block east of Vine to Urbana Street, Urbana Avenue. Other goals from the downtown plan: strengthen economic activity in downtown, promote context-appropriate urban-style infill development to extend downtown's core character. Also increase downtown's vitality by attracting more residents. And of course, those are the goals. There's also implementation items such as redevelop vacant and underutilized lots and redevelop the Goodyear block. Okay, so a little bit of discussion. We talked about how we had requests for proposals issued by the city to develop this block. Those RFPs specified that this block has a future land use designation of Central Business District. So those respondents had that in mind when they responded. So we're currently in negotiations with TWG Development out of Indianapolis to make this redevelopment happen. I mentioned a couple ideas that we have for the site. It's not fully fleshed out yet, but 4 stories, up to 198 market rate residential units, 5,000 square feet of commercial space, 4,500 square feet of amenity space, and below grade parking. These are all preliminary at this point. The developer has agreed to work with residents and with city council to take in input, make sure it's appropriate for what the city wants to see and what the residents want to see here. In terms of development regulations, we're going from R5 and from R6 to B4. So the B4 district does allow for more intensive uses and a much larger variety of uses R5 and R6 being primarily residential uses for multifamily. The B4 is a commercial district, so that allows for all types of retail, offices, not really any industrial uses, but mostly retail and other associated services. In terms of the development regulations, the existing R5 district has a maximum building height of 35 feet. The R6 district is interesting. It has a maximum building height of twice the distance from the center of the street to the front of the building. So for these two lots here, the street's about 60 feet wide. There's a 15-foot front yard, so that's 45 feet. There's a theoretical upper limit of 90 feet currently. Of course, it's constrained by floor area ratio and economics, so that's highly unlikely. And in the B4 district, there is no limit to height, except there are increased setbacks for side and rear yards if you go over a certain height. And of course, economics would dictate that height can't go too high. In terms of floor area ratio, R5 has a maximum ratio of 0.9. The R6 district has a maximum ratio of 1.4. So you could cover the entire lot here and most of the lots for the R5. In the B4 district, the maximum ratio is 9.0. Open space, currently the open space ratio is 0.35, so 35% of the floor area, or an area equal to 35% of the floor area is needed as open space under the current zoning. There's no requirement for open space in the B4 district, as it's meant to have urban style development with no setbacks. And speaking of setbacks, the current setbacks are 15 feet along the front yards, so along Elm Street, along Urbana, along Green, under the current zoning. Under the proposed zoning, the B4 district has a provision where any yard needs to match that of the adjacent yard or a yard across the street. So across the street, the required yards are 15 feet, and that is what is required by our B4 district. Okay. So basically, the proposed zoning would allow for a higher floor area ratio. The project, as currently proposed, would have a floor area ratio around 2.5. So that's something that's not allowed under the current zoning. And that's the development regulations. I guess at this time I'd like to invite Brandon Boyes, our economic development manager, and he's going to just give us a little more background on the whole development agreement process, how that's been going and where it's going.
Hi, good evening. I'm Brandon Boyes. I just want to give a sense of what the redevelopment process will be like moving forward. I believe your packet did a good job summarizing the activities the staff has been engaged in roughly the last 5 years trying to market this site for redevelopment for mixed use. I oversaw the most recent RFP process, and I can say we're very pleased to have this process result in the selection of TWG Development. We had a good site visit with multiple council members to go out and see some of the projects of this company, and we're excited to be working with them. I just want to emphasize that despite our optimism that there is still much work to be done before a final redevelopment agreement will be reached with TWG. In the coming weeks, we expect a preliminary site proposal will be negotiated and publicly announced and made available for comment at that time. That proposal would be made consistent with the determination of this zoning process, and also we'd review it for compliance with other building codes and so forth. One crucial component of the anticipated agreement that would result from this whole process is that we will require the creation of a new TIF district in order to create the level of incentive that we anticipate will be needed in order to mobilize a project of this scale. And that really isn't specific to TWG as a developer. I'd say that's something we consistently heard from those who applied for this project. So that new downtown TIF district is something that will be first more formally considered by our city council this coming Monday, February 22nd. And that process will take another 90 to 120 days, kind of at a minimum beyond that, before that new TIF district is created. So that TIF is not likely to be created until roughly July of this year, or not sooner than, I would say. And the city council would not be in a position to approve a redevelopment agreement for this project until such time that new TIF district is created, because it is enabling the project to move forward. I'd also like to note that any project criteria that the city wishes to impose beyond compliance with zoning and building codes, which is a standard provision of any development agreement we do, that would require approval by the full city council as part of the redevelopment agreement itself. So there are provisions and methods by which the city, when it leads a redevelopment project on its own property, can create additional conditions for those projects, and we expect to get lots of good comments from the public when we have a preliminary site plan available. Is there anything else you'd like me to?
All right, thank you, Brandon. Great. So let's just wrap this up with our LaSalle criteria. The LaSalle criteria are the things we look at to make sure rezoning is legally up to snuff in the state of Illinois. The first criteria looks at the existing land uses and the surrounding zoning of nearby properties. We discussed those. There's vacant properties and parking lots and 3 single-family homes across the street from the area to be rezoned. And to the west is vacant parking and B4 Central Business District. The second criteria looks at the extent to which property values are diminished by restrictions of the ordinance. Basically, a suitable zoning district is required to enable the development of this property as envisioned by the downtown plan and the comprehensive plan. With this in mind, property values of the subject properties will be put into a better position following the rezoning. The anticipated quality and aesthetic appeal of the proposed development would minimize any detrimental effects on the surrounding properties and would have an overall positive impact. It should be noted city planning and staff are not professional appraisers. Third and fourth criteria we take together, does the ordinance promote the health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the public? And is there a relative gain to the public as compared to the hardship imposed on the property owner? In this case, the city is the property owner, so we would be receiving the harm if there is any. There's no harm to the health, safety, morals, or general welfare of the public. Basically, the rezoning would allow for achievement of one of the city's redevelopment priorities, constructing this urban-style infill mixed-use building. It would help boost our downtown's economy by providing more residents in the area. There would be more shopping for immediately nearby neighbors. It also fill in some missing sidewalks. I should note there's along Elm Street on this half of the block. And along Urbana, there's basically no sidewalk. Sometimes you can see a few bricks that have not been completely overgrown, but currently there's no way that these areas could be passed by someone in a wheelchair. Criteria 5, the suitability of the subject property for the zoned purposes. The property is located along a major corridor, Vine Street, that goes through downtown. The subject property is vacant. The area around it is underdeveloped, so it is ripe for redevelopment. And the final criteria, the length of time the property has been vacant, not really a factor in this. The city acquired these properties in 2010 and cleared them at that time in anticipation of redevelopment. So options tonight. Plan Commission has the following options. Option 1, forward the case to City Council with a recommendation for approval. Or option 2, forward the case to City Council with a recommendation for denial. If Plan Commission chooses this option, please provide the reasons for the denial. And the staff recommendation, before hearing any public input, but based on the facts before us, staff recommends Plan Commission forward this case to City Council with a recommendation to approve the proposed rezoning to B4. We noted there was a communication which was emailed directly to Plan Commission from Laura Huth. That letter was also available on the rear table, and I believe she's here to speak today as well, so I'll let her reiterate her points. And additionally, tonight we have J.B. Curry from TWG Development. He is here to speak as a proponent during the public hearing. And I would be happy to answer any questions for staff.
Questions for staff? I've got a couple. Well, let me reverse the order I was going to do it. My understanding is that this is the only item in this process that will come before the Plan Commission. That is, the TIF does not come before the Plan Commission, and the negotiated agreement does not come before the Plan Commission.
That's correct.
Okay. I think it's important for Plan Commissioners to keep that in mind, what we're dealing with is a rezoning. Second, at the moment, these are individual parcels, which means that the yards are front yards on East Green Street. At least one is a front yard on Urbana. I think two are actually, I can't quite see.
We've got 3 front yards on Urbana.
And then 2 on Elm. Now, in what we are doing, we are not replatting this, am I correct?
Basically, once the site is rezoned to B4, this entire site is considered one zoning lot. But
Because?
Because that's something in our zoning ordinance. If there's adjacent properties with the same zoning district under the same ownership, they can be combined into one zoning lot for purposes of meeting the zoning ordinance.
Okay. So, without being replatted.
Correct.
Okay. So, once rezoned, the presumption, not yet actually stated anywhere, is that Vine Street is the front yard?
Once they're all combined as a zoning lot, this lot will have 4 front yards, basically.
Okay. Which, if I understand that correctly, means that the side yard condition you described will not apply.
Correct.
That is, there will be a 0 setback requirement on all 4 faces, regardless of the height of the building.
Except for the provision of what's across the street, if you want to go into that,
No,
Joe.
that's for side yards.
Oh, no, that is for any required yard, so that's, do you have that section number, Lori? Yep.
Where I see it, it only applies to side yards.
There's a height restriction which plays into the side yards and rear yards.
For anyone with a zoning ordinance in front of
Okay,
them, it's
it-
page 65,
Yes.
paragraph C, and I'd have to go back a few pages to see which section that is. That is section 6-5 yards, subparagraph C. In the B1, B2, B3, B4, and other districts, any yard which adjoins, abuts, or is situated across a dedicated right-of-way of 100 feet or less in width from the R1, R2, R3, R4, R5, R6, etc. district shall be the same as that required in the latter district.
Wait a minute, where are you getting this?
Section 6-5, paragraph C, page 65 in the 2015 version of the zoning ordinance.
Put your new zoning ordinance in there. Have the new one, Lou?
Yeah, okay, I guess I don't have the new one. Okay. So that, okay. I've got that answer then. And just one other thing, presumably the alleys would be vacated.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay. Here it is at the top of the page.
Yeah, okay. It's not the thing that was referenced in the part that I found, so, but I have it now. One other question. Urbana Street is currently an unimproved street in the block in question. Do we know where it is in our capital improvements program?
No, we don't. Oh. Oh, great. Glad you're here.
Just so happens I'm here. So I'm Craig Schunkweiler, Assistant City Engineer, and I handle all the street improvement projects. In the 5-year plan, it is currently not in the 5-year plan at this point. There has been some talk about maybe possibly doing it in conjunction with this project, maybe a TIF project, but it's currently not in the 5-year plan.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Craig.
Okay, any other questions for staff?
Question. Is the intent, I guess, of what we're doing to be able to build by rights in the B4 district instead of having to do a PUD later on?
Yes, that is the intent.
So we're essentially streamlining the development process, kind of avoiding a few public hearings?
Well,
I
except
mean, indirectly, I guess.
the comprehensive plan in 2005 did envision this as building something that is consistent with the central business district, which is the B4 zoning.
Okay.
I'm a little concerned about the underground parking. What depth is the storm sewer in this area?
I'm not sure, but we've got a professional developer. I'm sure they can make it work.
Other questions?
In the sort of the
proposed thing, what's the minimum parking requirement for a 198 unit building in B4?
In the B4 district, there is no required parking.
The other sort of question I have was sort of, in the end result, how wide a sidewalks are we going to end up with on the four sides of a development like this?
I don't think that's been designed yet, but the minimum width is 5 feet per the land development code
On all four sides?
for a new sidewalk.
To be clear, that's sidewalk pavement width,
Yeah.
not right-of-way or setback. Correct?
Yes,
Okay.
and that's normally in the right-of-way.
Any other questions?
Jeff, with such a large building, there's going to be increased traffic, and that's going to be a real problem with entrance and egress, especially off of to Green and Elm and Vine. Is there a traffic plan to accommodate this increased traffic?
We haven't gotten that far in the process yet. I'm currently thinking traffic might go down to Illinois, but I don't know if there's any plans to improve the light, improve the infrastructure at Green Street. I don't think there is at this time.
I noticed that the thing proposes that the garage would have entrances and exit, would have an entrance on Urbana as opposed to on one of the other streets. Is that like negotiable or?
I would assume everything's negotiable at this point, but I think that's due to the topography of the site.
Sort of, the other thing is, okay, we're going to put a 198 unit building here. Urbana have any plans for making Vine a little more pedestrian friendly to cross?
Yes, that would be part of it.
Anything you'd like to share with us?
We haven't worked out any details yet.
Okay.
Okay. If there are no further questions, thank you. Now, proponents who wish to speak to the commission? Sign in on the sheets and tell us who you are.
Sure. Thank you for having me. My name is JB Curry. I am with TWG Development. So we are the developers. I've been working with the city. Thank you, Jeff, for all the information you provided. I guess a little background info on us and myself. I'm the vice president of our market rate development group, so I'm in charge of all of our market rate developments, mixed-use developments. We also have an affordable arm on our company as well. However, this would be 100% market rate, so that's why I'm involved and I'm here. We are a full-service real estate development firm based out of Indianapolis. We're currently in 3 states, Indiana, Ohio, and Iowa. We do both development and construction and management as well. So we oversee the preliminary design phases of a development, such as what we're doing right now, the rezoning process, securing the financing, the equity and the debt, working through any zoning or variance issues, and then we have a GC component that oversees the construction of our projects. We have an open bidding process in any new market or any market that we go in, whether it's Indianapolis, throughout the state of Indiana or in a different state. So all local unions, all potential subs will be contacted. We have a very open process to that. Happy to share more information to you regarding that process as you wish. Once we complete the project, we also own it and we manage it. We do so because we like to keep our developments nice. We like to keep tenants wanting to live there, and we like to make sure that things are running smoothly with our development. So we have a very experienced management team as well who would go through that process. How we wound up here is we were contacted by the CBRE broker Gordon Hendry, who brought us a site, introduced us to Brandon, Lori, Libby, in the city of Urbana itself, and we came and saw the site. We did our own, I guess, initial research on what we thought we could do with the site, what the RFP called for, and we put together an initial preliminary proposal with an architect group that we've worked with out of Indianapolis to evaluate how we could achieve an urban mixed-use, high-density site. Right now, before you, in the attachment that I've sent out regarding the 198 apartment units, the commercial space, the lobby space, the amenity space, is where we're at right now. We think 4 stories helps us achieve this without going too high, and underground parking is one way to help solve the issue of urban, suburban tenants. How many cars do they need? In a more dense market, you might see a ratio much less than one parking stall per unit. However, in this situation, we think it is appropriate to have 1 parking stall per unit here. I guess as an introduction, everything right now is negotiable. Before we would dig or touch anything, regarding the question on the sewers, we would do an underground utility search. Not only for the sewers, but the fiber optic lines. There are lines running through the site above ground that you can see now that would have to be dealt with before any further construction is met with. We are also very aware of the transition from a more commercial retail, the mall, the courthouses, into single family moving to the east, and we do want to respect that transition. I think with urban planning, mixed use does help that transition, but we do want to be aware of the setbacks on the site. I don't think increasing setbacks from the street to the actual part of the building really damages the product. I think the only thing our architect would caution us for is just to make sure we're getting the most efficient underground garage as possible. But we certainly want to use landscaping. We want to activate Vine Street as much as possible. I think some open door patio space with a restaurant user would help fulfill that. I think we want to help improve the hardscapes as far as the sidewalk is concerned. I've noticed throughout the city in the downtown there has been some treatment to the sidewalks that's very noticeable and looks great, and we want to keep that. To the east with the neighborhood, we do want to respect that there are single family homes there. There are a lot of large mature trees. We do plan on planting a number of trees and shrubbery and having a landscape architect evaluate that. With regards to the parking entrance, it does make sense to have the entrance for the underground garage be on the east side just because of the topography. However, I think that we could work that in on the northeast or the southeast corners, whether that actually entry point is actually on Elm or on Green Street. But it does make sense to bring it away from Vine as far as getting an efficient garage and parking stalls on that standpoint. We can certainly discuss further specifics of the site, but the construction itself would be 4 stories wood frame. If we go higher than 4 stories, we'd have to require whether it be a steel podium or a concrete podium to do so. But I think we can still achieve a very high quality, very neighborhood appropriate, city appropriate project with the 4 stories and with the underground parking. I can answer any questions you have about our company, about the project itself, or our vision for it. I welcome you all to visit any of our developments throughout Indiana or neighboring states. I know it's quite a drive, but our website, twgdev.com, has all of our projects on it. And I know there are a couple projects here that the council toured in downtown Indianapolis. I would note the one project that is labeled Pulliam Square Phase 2 currently has a hole in the ground. It's a Phase 2 of the Pulliam project. So Phase 1 is complete, and we're beginning to close on the financing and then begin construction on Phase 2. So with that, I guess any questions for myself or?
Another question. These, I suppose, aren't technically germane to our decision, but a couple of questions. One, again, the intent is you're going to build by rights in B4? You may not be able to answer that question, but.
I believe so.
Okay.
Yes.
And my other question, just about the proposal, is it's a mixed-use development that has 200,000 square feet of space and 5,000 square feet of commercial. That's not very mixed.
I think, we're doing some developments where some groups would consider 3,000 square foot mix, others would prefer 10,000. I think to go higher than 5,000 square foot, it is tough on the underwriting as far as raising the debt and the equity. So, I guess we can call it whatever we want. I do understand your question 100%. If we do have users that want to come to the table now, or whether that be when we have further neighborhood meetings in the future, we would certainly entertain the idea of creating more space for that. So.
Okay.
Our twin cities, not just necessarily Urbana, but Champaign-Urbana,
Mm-hmm.
have a host of these 4-story buildings with cheap cladding that does not look like it's going to make anyone happy in 10 or 15 years. What sort of cladding do you use on the exterior of your buildings?
We focus, the masonry is focused solely on the exteriors, whether that's cast stone, brick, limestone at the base, because that's going to take the most damage. Any sort of cladding, any sort of, EIFS or hardy or any of those materials mostly would be focused on the interior, because you're not going to see that from the street. I would say, as far as our developments in this packet that were new construction, our Lockerbie Lofts and our Pulliam Square, those have more masonry than I would say most of our competitors. So we are very aware of that. We want to build a long-standing building, especially entering into an agreement with the city. We want it to last. We don't want to have to do capital improvements after 2 years. So we certainly can respect and understand that.
And then back to the question about the mixed use.
Mm-hmm.
If you have 5,000 square feet set aside, so that means there would be a lot of ground floor units, residential units on the ground floor?
Correct. So there would be walk-up units and the possibility to have 2-story townhomes, if that would.
And would those have direct access onto the sidewalk?
Yes. Yes.
Other questions?
Since you're going to be managing this too,
Mm-hmm.
Do you envision the possibility of, if you don't, actually, let me rephrase it a little. The idea here is that you rent a unit, you get a parking space as included in your.
Correct. There is not, currently we are not assuming any rent for parking, correct?
So you're not, so suppose it's half empty.
The parking garage itself?
Theoretically, we'd love to see people who living here who don't own a car.
Right.
Do you envision options for utilizing that as either public parking or leased parking for people who otherwise might use nearby surface lots? Is that something you envision?
That's something that if the city wanted to address in the project agreement, I think that's something that we could definitely write in there. I know the way the site sits now, I know there's parking on site that's being used, I believe, by the city. Is that correct? So if it came to the point where there were 50, 60 spaces continually being unused, and that was a way to, gain a source of revenue back to the city, we'd 100% entertain that.
Do you envision a portion of your parking to be devoted to bike parking?
We would definitely include bike storage. We find in most of these developments, people prefer, in more urban environments, our residents do use bikes quite more than I would have thought. But we have bike park, and we can get pretty creative with that as well as far as saving space. The actual wall hanging with the bike on the wall has been pretty helpful. It's been covered. Key fob access, or whole development would have key fob access, but yes, for the bikes it would too. I guess now while I'm on that point, we would have all security cameras at all entry points and exit points in our development, just to be, cognizant of safety for people and their belongings.
Last quick thing, I'm assuming, you're not envisioning any of your street level facades to be sort of blank wall.
No, and I don't think I'd expect any of you all to expect that either.
Okay.
No, I think there's definitely a really good opportunity here, especially with walk-up units and to be able to have a more in and out approach instead of just a rectangle or a square donut that's just plopped down. We don't want to plant a proverbial spaceship and just sit it there. So,
All right, thank you.
Sir, I see you have 200 below-grade parking spaces, and I guess because of past bad experiences, I kind of caution you that we have a high water table here, and the elevation of the storm sewer is going to determine how dry that basement remains.
Right.
But if you've got 198 residents and 200 units and 200 parking spots, where are the business parking going to be?
I think as far as street parking goes, there is an opportunity, I believe, on Elm and Green to have street parking. I didn't want to overshoot the underground parking spaces. I think the site is very, very efficient from a parking stall standpoint. I'm optimistic that we can get more than 200 and hopefully devote 10 to 20 of those for the commercial user. I think 200 is pretty conservative, but if there was the chance of fewer residents using parking spaces or devoting some street parking to the commercial, I think we can try to work something out with that. But I understand that concern.
Thank you.
All righty. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Anyone else who wishes to speak in favor of the arrangement?
Good evening, Plan Commissioners, Chair Hopkins. I sent an email communication to everyone earlier this week, so I won't waste your time in reading it again. But I did want to show up to show my enthusiasm in person for this project. It was something that was envisioned back in the days when I was on City Council, and I believe this is the time for action finally. It's taken a little longer than I had envisioned back when I was on council, but I'm glad that day is finally here. What's been proposed to you in this mixed-use development is almost exactly what we had envisioned way back then. The neighborhood was enthusiastic about it then. They are still now. I still live in the neighborhood about 6 blocks from here, and I would welcome a development like this as a transition from our downtown core into the historic East Urbana neighborhood. I did have a chance to talk to Mr. Curry earlier this week to talk with him about some of the very things that you've brought up tonight with regard to parking, the ingress, egress, the landscaping, and the facade work. And he was amazingly open to talk to. Which isn't always true for some of the developers that the city has worked with in the past. So I have a really good feeling about this project, not just because of its potential value for the city in a number of regards, including expansion of our tax base, but I also see we've got a real opportunity here to form a really important relationship with a developer that appears to be very committed to our community, and probably not just on this project. I think if we do this right, that we could probably see more things coming in the future, and I, for one, would really welcome that. So I urge you to vote in favor of this rezoning.
Laura, I was trying to read your email. Did you have any concerns about the ingress, egress, or do you feel like those have been addressed?
Yeah, I did. I talked to Mr. Curry. My main issue is having represented this area on City Council. I should mention also, I don't work for Mr. Curry. I'm here just representing myself. I just want to make that clear. So when I canvassed this area for City Council, that lot was, I don't know how many people remember that long ago and what that lot looked like. I mean, it was dilapidated, and I think it was, as much as I hate seeing older homes come down in this neighborhood, that it was a time for that to happen. That said, I still traverse Urbana Street quite often. I walk to downtown, I bike to downtown quite a bit. And the idea that Urbana Street, unimproved, which is a good observation, for 2 reasons I didn't think was the best way to bring egress and ingress into the property's underground parking. One is, if we want the project to succeed and we want other people to be seeing this building and potentially this commercial spot, we want the parking to be very obvious, right? You start hiding the parking, people are circling, they get frustrated, they go somewhere else. We don't want that to happen. And hiding it off of a residential street that's over a block away, that doesn't seem to be the best option. I get the whole, there's a 7-foot differential. Second, though, that's the neighborhood I live in, and my neighbors live there. I know Mr. Storer doesn't live that far away from there, and we don't want to just willy-nilly bring traffic into the neighborhood if we don't have to. So I posed the question: do we have to? Is the 7-foot differential, something that we absolutely need to work with? And Mr. Curry said no. Some good points. I think we can look at it, and I think time will tell whether or not that can actually play out. But it sounded to me from our conversation they were definitely willing to look at that, and as long as the engineering would permit it, I would think that that's probably a better way to go. Thanks.
Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the proposed design?
Yes, as far as the topic of rezoning, I think that I personally don't have any problem with consolidating the properties for the development. It makes sense to have them all zoned the same way. Some of my concerns, that I probably will mention have actually been touched upon here very thoughtfully, but before I do that, I want to make one announcement. I just came back from the Forest Preserve, Champaign County Forest Preserve meeting, and the approval of a $2.7 million funding for the Kickapoo Trail was passed. So we will see the beginning and the beginning of that, the realization of that trail from Vermilion County, Danville, to at least St. Joseph. So I thought that would be a nice thing to announce at this meeting. I prepared a letter to you all, and maybe I'll just summarize it, perhaps. Of course, I do really care about this development. It is a big development at the very edge of the historic East Urbana neighborhood. I live 2 blocks from the back of this development on Green Street. I will be strongly affected by the result of changed patterns in traffic and parking if parking isn't thought about in a consistently thoughtful way. Having the parking in this proposal under grade, below street level, is an excellent way to minimize that impact, and it sounds like they have plenty of parking spots in mind for the building, although one-to-one does leave the question about what's going to happen if there is commercial space there, and I think it does need to be addressed. Also, the direction in which parking, the people access a parking garage in that block could be of importance. You have a couple of residential houses on Urbana Street currently. We don't know what the fate of those homes is going to be, if those people are going to remain in the shadow of a very large new construction for very long. They are right now cottages, but the land is zoned for higher density, and we may find that we see a turnover on Urbana Street in the near future because of this project. So there is an erosion of the neighborhood I live in, which is traditionally a blue-collar working man's neighborhood that was established mostly to serve the Big Four railroad company yards that used to be here in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And also this property in East Urbana was one of the later developed pieces of property to be platted behind that which was developed on the west side of town, partly because the Weber family kept their property in agrarian uses and forestry for a lot longer. That being said, there are 100-year-old homes on that and plus on that in East Urbana, very close to this building that's being proposed. So the building is going to be of such a larger proportion compared to the rest of the neighborhood that I truly appreciate the comments that TWG representative J.B. Curry has been offering as far as his willingness to comply with setbacks and landscape and screening, and I'm suggesting that it would be most appropriate to try to do those on all sides of the building. And it wasn't until this meeting that I was informed that it would be possible indeed to establish setbacks on all sides of the building, because there are properties across the street that have required setbacks. And I think that if that were not true, I'd be very, very concerned about the fact that the building might be built to the sidewalk. I think the idea of having some landscaping as a setback, which is, you actually see that across the street at the Federal Building. There is a strip of green grass on the other side of the sidewalk in front of the facade of the Federal Courthouse. And I think that's a good standard to go by. In my letter, which you haven't seen, but which I prepared and gave to the clerk, I was thinking that there should be 25 feet from the curb to the whatever construction there is. Now, I don't know how that might play out if we allow for a parkway green space and then a sidewalk and then perhaps a little bit more green space until the building starts. That would be my vision of what a setback would look like. But if the sidewalk ends up being at the curb of the street, I still think that there should be planting and grass, because these help and trees to grow to maturity. You notice that all the trees on that lot have been clear cut by our arbor division, so there's no mature trees currently on that lot. But certainly you'd want to have a softening effect of a large building as it is against the R2, R4 homes that are adjacent to that. Now, my other concern, I guess, would be that Mr. Trail, I think you brought up about safely crossing Vine Street. I cross Vine Street several times a day, going to the library, going to the mall, going into downtown. I do a lot of foot traffic myself. I almost never drive my car anywhere in Urbana. And I find that it's not always so easy to cross Vine Street at Green. It's not marked as a pedestrian crossing, and yet it is a major entrance into Lincoln Square Mall. Cars have just been stopped at Main Street, and I don't think it's probably likely that we're going to put a light at the corner of this development, say on Green Street, because that'd be too soon. We have a light on Illinois Street. I know, would it even be valid to put a stop sign? Probably not. There probably wouldn't meet the code of requirements for a stop sign. But there should at least be a marked crosswalk at this site. Plus, when you consider that there might be 200 new individuals living in the building who will be crossing the street constantly, traffic on Vine is significant. Perhaps there's going to have to be a divided, the planting, which now serves as a 5-foot divided median, may have to be redesigned for safety for pedestrians. We're glad to see activity brought to the downtown. I'm a fan of infill redevelopment. 4 stories is not a daunting height, I don't think. One of my constituents who lives on the street the corner I live on Grove Street, said, well, whatever happens, I still want to be able to see the county clock tower. Well, you know, from a distance, perhaps the height of 50 feet or whatever it'll be that a 4-story building will acquire may still be low enough from the perspective of the viewpoint of a person on their front porch to be able to see over that to the clock tower. The clock tower is higher than 50 feet, so we do have hope. We realize, though, that development in the downtown is going to be happening. This has been a vacant lot for quite a few years. When the East Urbana neighborhood penned its white paper position report, I guess you would call it, would be the East Urbana's own version of a neighborhood plan paper, which is on file and was part of the comprehensive plan documents. we did realize that this was going to be developed, and I don't think we're afraid of that. I think I'm happy to have. It would be great if we had new jobs in the building as well as residences, but professional residences occupying our community and shopping locally is important to us, and I approve of the expansion of the downtown beyond Main Street. So for all those reasons, I approve this rezoning. The only other thing I want to say is that the materials used in this building should be of the highest quality that we can expect. It's going to be a permanent major new building in the downtown. This is going to be the biggest project we've had in the downtown, since the Tierenman building was built or the Busey Bank. So this is not to be taken lightly. And I would encourage TWG to use quality materials and not to skimp on the interior, because the interior is still the interior of the building, just because you don't see it from the street, still adds quality to the entire building. And I think that we should encourage them to use brick as much as possible, which matches the courthouse and the federal courthouse that we have nearby. And I would encourage them to consider some of the buildings that we have developed on the campus, like Eikenberry Commons and the new residence halls, and also the building on the corner of University and Lincoln, which is 901 Lincoln. It's called the Illinois Building, at least from the facade, there's the sign on it. And this is where Engelman Brothers Donuts or Bagel Shop is located. That's a recently built building. That's a handsome building that has a lot of good commercial space below and handsome enough office and office space above. It's a nice example of what we might want to see at this location. This commission, I'm afraid, is never going to get the opportunity to review any architectural details or site plans, and I think that's criminal, really. So if they can't, because I think that the community really does need to have an open forum, to have interaction and review of a significant kind on any project so large in this community. And I would not want to leave this just to the determination of staff for various reasons. I think staff is totally, they're very smart, they're very wise, they're very cogent about what can work economically, but people have many other concerns, and staff's excitement to have development may perhaps mitigate some aspects of the concerns of the residents as a whole in the community. So those are just my comments. I really encourage the development to be the greatest it can be for us. I welcome it, and I appreciate TWG's commitment to work with the community. We expect to have a nice meeting with the Huna neighborhood, and with that, I'm just going to hope for the best.
Is it not the case that with the city as the owner of the property and a final development agreement coming before City Council, that you, in fact, will be able to hear the comments of the citizens and say yes or no, or alter the agreement?
Well, that is truly the saving grace of the experience. Yes, the City Council can do that, and the city and the public can do that. But I guess my concern is that by the time it reaches the City Council, the architectural plans will be set. The decisions really will be pretty much in place, and redesigning at a later date is going to be difficult. So I encourage TWG to interact with the community. They seem to be totally willing to do so. I think that we can probably work through any little questions about safety, pedestrian use, parking, early on, so that we all, by the time we see architectural elevation plans that have been committed to, hours of work by some architect or their own staff, will not be in vain. That's all. Thank you, though. Yep.
Anyone else wish to speak to the commission on this case?
My name is Margaret Miller. I live a couple of blocks away, and I have since 1988. Looking at those maps of all the vacant places and parking lots, those were all full of homes in 1988, were lovely homes, which have been demolished for parking lots and other things here. So that kind of hurts to see that all vacant and acting like it needs to be populated when it was populated. So TWG has been terrific. They came for a special meeting with us, and I feel like they have a lot of positive ideas about having green space, about having setbacks. But my concern is when I see with B4, no minimum open space ratio, no front yard, no side yard, no rear yard is required. Now, if something happens with all these other steps that have to be gone through, and for some reason, TWG, who seem to be very positive people and very ethical and really trying to work with the neighborhood, if something happens and they can't come through on it, and we have B4, then somebody else can come in and say, we don't need any green space. It says so right here because we've got B4. So once we've given that permission, do we have any recourse? I don't know. That's something I'm concerned about. And all the other questions that were asked, I really appreciate about the safety crossing the road, about the bikes, about the parking, about the water table. Those are all really good questions, but I don't know if that's really our purview here to determine those things. Thanks.
Questions? Thank you. Anyone else who wishes to speak to the commission on this case? Okay, so we'll close the public input portion and begin deliberation. We can talk a bit first, or we can start with a motion and discuss a motion. What do you want to do this time?
Just regarding her question, would there be any recourse if for some reason, you know, the company wasn't able to go through with the development if it was B4?
Well, the property would still be owned by the city of Urbana, and in order to do anything there, it would have to go through a similar process, very public process.
Okay.
To be very precise on that, really on that question, at what point in this process does ownership of the property transfer?
Brandon Boys again. Specifically, that would occur after the execution of a redevelopment agreement, which would likely not occur until July at the earliest, because in this instance, it's contingent upon the creation of a new TIF district. And then typically, there are additional conditions precedent to the actual closing on the property. So there, oftentimes we require, other things to make sure that we're confident that the process will move forward.
Can you be a little more specific? I mean, the question pretty clearly is, does it have to be built for the transition of the property to occur? Or could they end up with a parcel that's vacant?
The developer is sold the property as part of the development agreement, and they are not allowed to develop the property prior to owning it. They develop it on property that they own, but the sale is conditional in relation to the development agreement.
All right, I'm not sure I'm getting the answer to my question. Let me frame it slightly differently. This is the third try. Okay? Previous versions resulted in an empty lot, but they also ended while the city still owned the property. Is it the case that the city could end up not owning the property and it still be vacant?
Generally, no. It's very unlikely,
Okay, but not impossible.
not impossible.
So my reason for asking the question, and I think Ms. Bynum's as well, is we are rezoning it. And we rezone it, it's B4. It could be in private hands and undeveloped. Not likely, except it's happened a lot of times before in
Not in
city
the-
development processes.
Not in the city of Urbana.
No,
I don't believe so.
Maybe not to a development agreement,
Okay.
but if the development agreement doesn't include that it's got to be constructed,
No, it does include that. I will revise my statement. It is absolutely a requirement that the developer construct the project in order to
Before-
maintain ownership of the property.
okay. Any other questions?
Just to clarify, so you're saying the development agreement would say they have to build it, and if they do not build it, would it revert to the city if it had changed hands?
Typically, but that gets to a level of detail that I can't foresee because we
Okay.
have not drafted an agreement in
Okay.
this case. However, for other projects, the sale is conditional,
On the,
and oftentimes we take a countermanded deed so that the deed will actually automatically revert to the city in the event that something goes wrong.
Other questions? Discussion?
You ready for a motion?
I'll take a motion if,
Where's the language? I move approval and you can fill in the numbers.
here's the plan
I
case.
move that plan case 2268-M-16 be forwarded to City Council with recommendation for approval of the zoning request as presented in the plan case.
Do I hear a second? Discussion.
Others have expressed the concern about the lack of at least proposed commercial. I assume there's nothing that we can do at this stage which would encourage, discourage a greater commercial component to the development. I mean, we're just rezoning it to B4 and then B4 covers that. I tell you honestly, that's one of my biggest concerns, that at least the proposed development has relatively little commercial component for a downtown development like this.
Okay,
If there were a stronger market for downtown business, I'm sure that they would devote more, and we can't create the demand for commercial space by, I don't see how we do that at a zoning request, but the problem is, the only reason they have 5,000 is they're looking around at vacancies. But I'm sure they would be happy if there was a demand for commercial. It generally brings more per square foot than residential.
so I guess I would like to emphasize the record of this discussion, because this is our only opportunity for any input. And I'm prepared to vote in favor of this, but very unhappily, because the B4 zoning of this is, in my mind, particularly problematic. It has no height restriction. It has a 9.0 FAR, floor area ratio. On half the site, you could have an 18-story building. Now, is that going to happen? No. And I guess the reason I'm willing to do this is because the city owns the land and can negotiate. So I think it becomes absolutely essential that the negotiated development agreement has the transfer of ownership contingent on the development actually being built. And the second thing I would say is, since we don't get another opportunity to talk about these things, that the TIF district should be designed in particular to improve Urbana Street from Main Street to Washington. I can't remember how far south it's unimproved, as access, and that affects the definition of the physical boundary of the TIF in a way that might not otherwise be thought of. And I would also make sure that the TIF includes the option of improving the pedestrian crossing to Lincoln Square. So I guess what I'm doing is saying what I would say if we were going to have the opportunity to say something. The building ought to be 4 stories, not 18. And the setbacks ought to be appropriate to the surrounding. So unless somebody else wants to say something, we can get a roll call.
Could I ask, what are the setbacks? Could you give us an actual numbers?
If,
Okay. So they're all okay.
And that would be the front yard all the way, so it's 15 foot.
It's 15 foot all around.
It's, well,
No.
on the property to be rezoned, it's 15 feet all around. On the part that faces Vine, it's across from B4, so there's no required setback along Vine.
but that section is already zoned
Yeah.
before.
Okay? I guess we're ready for a roll call.
Ms. Bindum?
Yes.
Mr. Fell?
Yes.
Mr. Hopkins?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Mr. Storr?
Yes.
Mr. Trail? Mr. Turner?
Yes.
And Mr. Ackerson?
Yes.
Okay, and that will go to council.
On March 7th.
Okay, next planning case is plan case number 2272 CP16. Bicycle plan.
Good evening. Before I start my report, I'm just going to explain how I'm going to go through it. First, I'm going to give a brief presentation on this case. I'm going to ask Gabe Lewis from the RPC, who authored the plan, to come up and describe updates that have been made since December when we had the joint meeting, and then I'll briefly wrap up with comments. Okay, so this case is a request by the zoning administrator that the Plan Commission and City Council adopt the 2016 Urbana Bicycle Master Plan as an amendment to the 2005 Urbana Comprehensive Plan. This new version of the Bicycle Master Plan would replace the current 2008 Urbana Bicycle Master Plan. This plan has been 2 years in the making. It was guided by a steering committee with members of many agencies in Urbana. And as I mentioned, it was guided by and has been authored by the RPC with a lot of input from the steering committee and from city staff. There were a series of public workshops to develop this plan. And those are designed to really maximize opportunities for citizens to provide input into the plan. And as you'll recall, back in December, there was a joint meeting where the RPC brought forward the plan. That was a joint meeting of the Plan Commission, our Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission, the Traffic Commission, and our Sustainability Advisory Commission. Then there was a public comment period that ended on February 1st. Also in that time, the Traffic Commission discussed the draft of the plan, and BPAC discussed the plan twice, the most recent time being just this past Tuesday. And at that meeting, BPAC discussed this case and the draft plan. They also discussed a small a draft executive summary that had been added to the plan. And then they approved a motion, which I believe you all have, but I will just read the motion here. And the motion was to approve the plan with the changes to the executive summary and with the idea that we will review the plan annually. They suggested changes which were to move the goals to the front of the executive summary, to increase language in the vision to indicate that that there's a want to improve. I think that might be referring to just to improve our bicycle-friendly status. The third is to outline the vision. The fourth is to include that we are a gold-level bicycle-friendly community. And then the last was to add that goals can be found in Chapter 9 and to really be clear that there are some major goals in the plan. And as I mentioned, the motion was approved unanimously. Staff is proposing the adoption of the 2016 Bicycle Master Plan as an element of the comprehensive plan. And really this bike plan addresses many of the goals and objectives from that plan. These are all detailed in your memo. I just want to touch on the objectives that it meets. One is to encourage development patterns that reduce dependence on automobiles and promote different modes of transportation, to provide pedestrian and bicycle connections to employment centers, to reduce the number and severity of pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicular crashes, to promote transportation improvements that help connect fragmented segments of the existing system, to improve pedestrian, bicycle, and transit access throughout Urbana, to promote bicycle and pedestrian access to major activity centers, to promote alternatives to automobile travel, to improve access to alternative transportation modes within neighborhoods, and finally to ensure that new developments provide easy access to pedestrians and bicyclists. In your memo on page 3, there's a brief summary of each of the chapters in the Bicycle Master Plan. Since Gabe detailed all of those at the joint meeting, I will not go through those again, but for your reference, they are in your memo. And I believe now I'd like to invite Gabe Lewis up here just to explain the details of changes that have been made since December.
Good evening. Thanks for having us. I'm Gabe Lewis. I'm a transportation planner with the Regional Planning Commission. We are the consultant for the city on this Bike Master Plan update. We also wrote the 2008 Urbana Bike Master Plan update, both myself and Rita. As Kevin said, I just wanted to touch on some of the comments that we've received to basically get you up to speed since the December 3rd joint commission meeting and presentation. So just to touch on that, there were a few comments at that meeting from the planning commissioners, and one comment was about impervious surfaces, concern about losing green space with the addition of bike paths using impervious surfaces. We added a new section to Chapter 12, which is implementation, that just references the Carl Park permeable sidewalk. It is just a walkway, but just talking about looking at impervious surfaces where possible upon implementation. A lot of bikeways, some of these bikeways we're recommending are on street, so there would be the stormwater aspect to consider there, but this is kind of an off-street example. Then, as Kevin mentioned, we had normally we do a 30-day public review period, and we actually had a slightly longer period because we started at the end of December, so December 23rd through February 1st was actually 41 days. We received about 6 comments. We received comments from 6 people, I should say. And then I think what I will do is go through the changes we've done to the document since then. There's just a 2-page handout that explains, I don't know if you guys have that or not, but some of those were to incorporate the comments that we received during that public review period. So within the plan document, we did a little housekeeping in terms of updating city staff and commissioner personnel. There was one comment mentioning the display of nature and soft trails on some of the maps in terms of existing. And so we removed all of those from the maps except for where they are part of a bike network. I should also point out, which I think we talked a little about on December 3rd, we developed this plan in conjunction with the Urbana Park District. They had a Trails Master Plan that was approved by their board on January 12th. And there's one segment that includes a soft trail, not a nature trail, so bicycles are not excluded. But beyond that, all existing soft trails are removed from the plan. Another comment we actually received was about Main Street and a desire to, talking specifically about West Main Street, to consider that for a bike boulevard treatment, which is a treatment that would give priority to bikes on a street that may not have as high of vehicle volumes. The area we're talking about is between downtown and the university, between the split at Springfield Avenue and Goodwin Avenue. The block immediately east of Goodwin Avenue was recommended as a bike boulevard as part of another study, as it's owned by the university. And so we've just added wording to explore the feasibility of extending that bike boulevard. That is something that city staff will have to look at upon implementation of the plan. Within recommendations, there is a bike parking and zoning ordinance recommendation section. All we did is clarify, we were asked to remove the zoning board of approvals from that, which we did. I want to be clear, within the scope of the study, we were asked to look at recommended wording, excuse me, to update the bike parking section of the Urbana zoning ordinance. We researched best practices, and we have proposed wording, but approving this plan does not change anything. It's for city staff and this commission and city council to look at upon if you want to investigate updating that section of the ordinance. But bike parking is based more on short and long-term visits to sites, 2 hours or more or less. Thank you. And anyway, that section is in there. In the bike corrals, we just changed Urbana Planning Department to Urbana Planning Division. And then we have 3 new recommendations. One is regarding enforcement, which is to enforce vehicle parking and bike lanes, to explore the creation of a city ordinance to enforce the restriction of cars parking in bike lanes, and 2 are regarding evaluation. 1 is about new and emerging treatments, and that includes bike boulevards, but to evaluate the feasibility and consider the installation of new and emerging bikeway treatments, including bike boulevards and neighborhood greenways, when aspects that can improve stormwater flow and the parkway environment can be incorporated. So there was some comments we received about a preference for neighborhood greenway versus bike boulevard. Neighborhood Greenway has a little bit more environmental aspect to that, so we added that. And then traffic calming policies and programs to evaluate new policies and programs that can be instituted by the city to create a safer, more welcoming environment for bicyclists. Beyond that, we updated the Appendix 2, which is the Bicycle Friendly America program that lists bike-friendly communities and businesses and universities. We had that information for 2014. We updated it for 2015, and we added a new appendix with the draft plan comments, which a lot of these were addressed with these changes. Additional comments that I didn't add in there, but one area map was asking about labeling the platted areas that Menards owns in East Urbana. We just added a label for what the squiggly lines for the trails there. Let's see. There were some comments on maintenance, just focusing on wanting to see the streets and bikeways maintained as opposed to as a priority over building new roadways or new bikeways. There was a comment with, there were some comments actually about separated bike lanes, people wanting more separation, and some about people enjoying or appreciating the sharrows. And there was a comment about pilot bike lane project, which was included in that emerging and new bikeway treatment section. So beyond that, we have been working with city staff, like Kevin mentioned at the BPAC meeting Tuesday. They did approve it with the condition that we develop an executive summary, and we've been working on that. We have a draft of that we've been working with the city staff to finalize, and I think it covers about everything I have in terms of changes.
Okay, and Gabe, you can stay up here for questions,
sure.
Obviously. Okay, so with that, so the Plan Commission has a few options in this case. The first is to forward this case to the City Council with a recommendation to approve the adoption of the plan as an amendment to the 05 Comprehensive Plan. The second would be to forward it with a recommendation to approve with specific changes. And the third would be to recommend denial to the City Council. Our staff recommendation, we would ultimately recommend forwarding it to the Urbana City Council for approval as an element of the 2005 Comprehensive Plan. We do feel that we would benefit with some additional time to incorporate some changes, or the changes suggested at BPAC on Tuesday, and to really flesh out the executive summary that Gabe mentioned was in draft form. And with that, that would conclude my report. We can answer any questions that you might have.
Questions? Mr. Otto.
I got it too late to have time to work through it, but there's a lengthy memo from Charlie Smythe with a lot of recommendations and so on. I assume you've had a look at this. I mean, I know him as a very serious biker and deeply invested in this, and I have a hard time knowing, because I haven't had time to work through it and correlate it with the page numbers. And can you say something about the concerns that he enumerates and the recommendations that he has?
Well, I think what he was going for is really, like I mentioned, is to really flesh out the executive summary portion. On the whole, he seems to be in favor of the plan. Obviously I don't want to speak for him, but there's just I think some visioning statements and really the executive summary that he would like time to have people flesh out.
So if we recommend this for approval now, is there opportunity for, give me the timetable again on when this fleshing out will take place?
Yeah, so I think, what what you could do would be to forward this to a later plan commission meeting. Maybe I think in a month, that's during spring break, so we'd probably be looking at April 7th. If you wanted to discuss the plan tonight and then forward it to that date to actually make a recommendation, that would probably make some sense. That would make some sense, and that should be enough time for staff and RPC to work through that.
Thank you.
Since we've got that, do you want to identify, is that the only communication on this case that we got? I think we should be making these for the record.
Yes, thank you. I believe Alderman Smythe submitted a couple of emails, and that is the only communication, other than things that are obviously have been incorporated in the plan over the last 2 years. So.
Yeah. Other questions?
So you actually would not have a problem with us delaying a decision on this for another month or so?
No, I don't think there's any. I mean, certainly we'd like to wrap this up because it has been a 2-year process, but then again, being a 2-year process, there's been a lot of work that's gone into it, so I think we want to make sure that we do it right as opposed to do it as quickly as possible.
Is there any real opportunity for significant changes to this with a delay of a couple of months?
Significant changes, probably not, but I really think that the focus would be on making the executive summary more robust. And it is a long plan, so having a good executive summary, I think, would only benefit people who aren't, planners that would read through a 300-page document. So if we have a good executive summary in place, then I think that would only benefit a broader audience.
So Charlie's on the city council, so it's going to go to him. And my reaction is he's got some very specific things he wants to be different. We could talk about them from a what kinds of planning statements should be where point of view, but since he's not here, that's not terribly useful in my mind. And if we don't have comments, my reaction is this is actually a public hearing, and we have to put a recommendation to the council. It doesn't make sense for us to put a recommendation that we know that council itself, if you like, is working on making changes. And I think Charlie considers them pretty substantive in terms of particular aspiration statements and other things, as well as specific items, what could be argued to be capital items in the proposal. So if nobody else is pushing us, I think we can shift this to a future meeting.
Oh, okay.
Okay? Can we?
Are there any
I move we table
comments?
this until April 7th.
Well,
Oh.
let's
Oh.
say to a future meeting, since we don't know all the details.
Well, it is a public hearing, and
Yes.
so in order for us not to
Oh,
have to
wait a minute.
re-advertise,
Yes, remind me, we have to go through the public hearing process.
that's true. And if you identify a date today, even if it gets moved in the future, if you identify it during the meeting, then it saves us the expense of re-advertising the case.
Okay, so let's deal with that. But also, I'm reasonably confident, but I can't see everybody. We really need to do the public hearing.
Oh, I see.
We've kind of jumped the gun.
Got it.
I got distracted, let's put it that way. So, any other questions for staff? Okay.
All right.
Does
Thank you.
anyone in the audience wish to speak to this case?
Yeah, I think just to affirm, this is Jeff
I-
Yockey. I live at 304 West Washington in Urbana, and I work with Champaign County Bikes. I think just to restate what you said, it is a long document. It's a lot to get your mind around, and I think, as Kevin was saying, that a well-done executive summary that lays out goals and priorities really helps you to navigate that, and it makes it clear where to go. So I think it's a good step, and I think it's the right thing. It's not a big process, especially to those that have waded into it now quite deeply. It's becoming more clear kind of how to wrap it up a little bit. So I think it'll happen quickly, and they can bring it to you.
Okay. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Did you want to sign
Oh.
in? Did you want to?
Yeah, you're supposed to
It'll
sign
help the secretary.
Okay, so we can close the public input portion of this hearing, which can be reopened later, just to keep everybody on the page. And I would now entertain a motion about what to do with it.
I move we table it until, is it April 7th?
That would give us about 6 weeks, so I don't know that, it seems like anything less than that is unlikely to happen, so that's
So do we have a date
probably
in May?
I mean, you could start with April 7th. If at that time it's not ready, then you can open it and continue it again.
So can I have a second? Okay. Any commentary before we do?
It would be good to get any comments on the plan now so that we can address them in the next few weeks.
I just have and if we had voted today, I was probably going to vote no. Not because I don't think the people who worked on it didn't do, a good job and spent a lot of time and effort and whatever. I just find it not as ambitious as I would really like to see it. I don't think that's going to be corrected between now and the next meeting that we have. I think some of that there's too much, where feasible and that sort of thing, as opposed to setting specific goals and things. And I'm sort of torn between the idea of, we could just vote today. I don't think it's going to change that much between now and the time so.
Well, I think some of the people working to change it are interested in some of the same concerns you are.
I think they're interested in some of the same concerns, but some I think I'm probably a little further out on a limb than.
Okay.
I mean, I see this as one of the key documents for if you really want to start making a transition to a community that is really starting to provide people an alternative to owning cars. This is a central document. And I don't think the document as constructed, partially I think because the scope that they were given and what they could talk about probably was limited. I think they need to talk a lot more about how bicycles and transit can work together and things like that. I don't think it's going to meet we delay a few weeks, I still don't think it's going to meet my goals. But I don't think it can get any worse by waiting for a while, but I don't know how much it'll actually improve.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. I guess we get a roll call for a table, or do we really need one? Okay, let's go. All in favor? We've got a motion. It's been seconded, so all in favor. I'm not going to do it with a roll call, is what I'm saying.
Oh, just do it by acclamation?
No, I'm going to do it by all in favor. Opposed? I think it passed, though I actually heard nothing on either one.
Well, that's why.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay, so that is tabled until, or continued until April 7th. Now, we have new business, line case 2273 M16.
So as required by state law as well as local ordinance within the city of Urbana, the city must adopt an officially recognized zoning map detailing any, just to be updated from any changes that have happened in the last year or since the last time it was adopted. The 2015 map was updated a year ago, tomorrow actually, today, on the 18th. Actually, no, it's on the 16th, my bad. Not that matters. So just the changes that are listed inside the memorandum that was sent out, there were a dozen and a few more rezonings. There was one annexation. There are two subdivisions, one that was outside of the city limits within the ETJ that is not reflected on this map, one that is reflected in this map. I'll just quickly zero in on where that subdivision was. It was splitting a lot on South Vine Street. So in the Ennis Ridge subdivision, you'll see right there, it was a duplex that was split evenly so it could be sold as separate condominium units. A lot of the 10 of the rezonings that were pending as of the time of this memorandum was published were approved on Monday night's city council meeting as they are listed right here. So there was no changes to their proposed rezoning. Those were all rezoned as listed. I can go over any one of those if you need me to. I figure just for the sake of time, we can. I'll just leave it to if you have any questions. And there was one right-of-way vacation, or there was one right-of-way that was vacated, and that is near 703 North Matthews. Near the Crisis Nursery. That alley that goes through the block, all that property is owned by the Crisis Nursery except for that southeastern parcel. Between when this map was sent out and today, I did make a few adjustments that were cosmetic in nature. One that has the parcel lines for the properties in the ETJ listed, as well as another scale listing by feet and a few other minor adjustments, but the substance of the map is the same. I can go into detail on that further, assuming it reloads correctly. But and for that matter, did you have any questions regarding the zoning map?
Any questions for staff? Okay. We have a large audience from the institutes. I think we can close the input portion of the meeting, of the hearing, excuse me. Getting ahead of myself. No, this is not a hearing. And I guess we need a motion and vote, correct, to send this forward to council. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
2273 M16. Can I get a second? Okay. Let's get a roll call on this.
Mr. Kelly, you seconded, right?
Yes.
Mr. Fell?
Yes.
Mr. Hopkins?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Mr. Storr?
Yes.
Mr. Trail?
Yes.
Mr. Turner?
Yes.
Mr. Ackerson?
Yes.
And Ms. Bynum?
Yes.
Okay, there's no study session. Do we have a staff report?
I wanted to report from council on Monday, items that you've heard previously. Chris just reported, of course, on the omnibus rezonings, which were approved. Also on council was the county zoning case to allow parking in the CR district if it is a fairgrounds. That was approved by, excuse me, let me rephrase that. That resolution was defeated, provided that the same condition that you placed on the motion was also placed by council, and that was to ensure that a parking garage would not be allowed. And just as a follow-up, how that was addressed in the language as it will be introduced to ELUC on March 3rd is to separate out the two uses. Previously, they had a use parking lot and garage. Now it'll be parking lot as one use and parking garage as one use. And a parking lot would be allowed as a special use in the CR zone, whereas a parking garage would not be allowed in any way in the CR zone. So that was that case. Coming up on the docket, as you know, the bike plan will come before you on April 7th. I don't think we have anything else slated at this point. The other thing that I wanted to announce, though, I think you've all received an email, is a save of the date, so more information to follow, but a citizen planner workshop to discuss specifically legal and procedural topics as they are pertinent to planning and zoning will take place on April 27th. That is a Wednesday from 4:45 p.m. to 8 p.m. Dinner is included. So stay tuned. I hope you'll mark your calendars because it should be a good program and it'll touch on some things that we often don't touch on in these meetings. So I think that is it for staff report.